Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Echoes rundown for Better Call Saul, Season 3, Episode 9, Slip, aka the one where Howard finally grows a pair. I'm so excited about this episode, and also, kinda super bummed out. It's a weird emotion. This is such a great penultimate episode to this series. Such an amazing setting up of everything to go right and wrong at the same time. So let's talk about it. Our cold open is Jimmy going to Sandpiper to see his oldest clients at that place, Irene, and he's working a little bit of his Jimmy magic on her, just trying to get a sense of what is going on with the Sandpiper case. If you'll recall, I think as early as Season 1, definitely by Season 2, Jimmy was working for these elderly people, trying to get them set up with a class action lawsuit against Sandpiper because they'd been overcharging them for things, and he had turned it over to HHM to litigate for him. Obviously, kind of got it taken away, not really happy about sending it to them, but they were able to do better for him. So HHM has it now, and he is looking, as we find out as we go on in the scene, for the dollar amount, for how much they're currently being offered and how much they're going to settle for. And he's got his real nice guy glasses on, you know, his smile and his Perry Mason suit, and as soon as he gets out of the room, he's doing math. And he's figuring out, and this is something, by the way, it's interesting the way this scene plays out. You don't know what Jimmy's motivations are. Even when the scene is over, you don't get it 100%. But by the time the episode's finished, you definitely know what he's doing here is calculating his payout. How much money he is going to get from this case because he has a stake in the payout. Jimmy obviously hurting real bad for money at this point. Television producing not working for him. Really disappoints me that he doesn't become a television producer for a year until he gets his lawyer license back. I would have loved to see that, but that's sort of falling through. We've seen an inkling of him doing the Saul Goodman thing with the people on his cleanup crew, but really he's just stuck. That's not a viable source of real income for him, and he has to figure out a way to get his hand on this Sandpiper money, and soon. That's going to play out through the episode. Before we get to that, though, Mike and Lydia. What a great team up. I'm trying to think if we've seen them together before in Breaking Bad times. I think we have. I think there was the episode where she was freaking out and he was trying to calm her down. But this is their first meeting together, and it's the culmination of what we saw in the previous episode, the final scene where Mike and Gus shook hands, and the money that Mike wants to be laundered is going to be laundered through Madrigal Electromotive. Big player in Breaking Bad. They're bringing it in here. Kind of an interesting Deus Ex Machina in Breaking Bad, honestly. A way for things to continue on after Gus Fring's death. The idea that there was more to his empire than just Pollos Hermanos. And yet, here, knowing that we're coming at it from the other end, and it's not sort of something that the writers came up with to solve a problem, it feels more real and like more of a part of this universe. Not that it didn't in Breaking Bad, but it kind of felt like, oh, by the way, here's this other thing. Whereas we're baking this into the premise of the show, and it's one of the things that Better Call Saul is doing really well as a prequel. It's creating this world that is going to be played out in Breaking Bad and strengthening what we're going to see in that show. And here's Lydia at Madrigal. She's setting Mike up, and she's obviously a lot different than when we see her in Breaking Bad, because in Breaking Bad, we don't meet her until everything's essentially falling apart for her. But here, she's positive, she's hopeful, she's not particularly nervous. And Mike asks all the questions because Mike is Mike, and he's careful, and he knows that his real name and his social and everything is going to be going down on the roll of this place. He wants to make sure he dots his I's and crosses his T's, He corrects what he's getting paid for. He says, no, you know what? Better be security contractor. That's something I know about. If somebody comes sniffing around, it makes sense that I gave you some advice about that. And so he's getting his $10,000 a week payout through Lydia. And the real point of this scene, I thought, was at the final moments when Mike talks to Lydia about Gus, and he says, look, you're sitting pretty here. You've got a nice office. It's a window office. You can see the logo outside. By the way, great, beautiful design. I love the interior look at the letters outside, on the outside of the building. That was great. But she's clearly sitting pretty in this Madrigal office, and he says to her, why? Why are you willing to risk all this for a drug dealer? And Lydia's response to this is telling in a couple ways. A, because I think Better Call Saul might be about to develop Gus Fring into even more than we realized he was in Breaking Bad. Because what Lydia says is, oh, he's so much more than a drug dealer. If you don't know anything about Gus Fring, if you think he's just a drug dealer. And we've seen some of his ambitions, right, in his movings in the cartels and things. But this hints at even more power that Gus Fring is trying to pull together for himself. And that's exciting. But the other half of that equation, for me at least, was that Lydia, in this moment, seems very personally enamored of Gus Fring. And that is something that I don't think we've really had a hint of before. Maybe, you could argue going back to her earlier scene in the season where her and Gus are checking out the laundromat, that maybe there's, she's very excited, but you could still write that off as her just being excited to work with him. There's something about this moment, though, that makes me think Lydia likes Gus. She's into him, possibly in a romantic way. And that's not something that I saw coming. And I could be wrong, right? I could be over-reading here. But I like that read. I like the idea, and I don't know if Gus is into Lydia. I know he's using her, and he might be using her, playing into her romantic notions in order to get what she has to offer. I would not put that past Gus, but I don't know. It turns out there's so much more to explore with these characters, even as much as we got in Breaking Bad. I love that Better Call Saul is digging so far into all of these people's lives, not just Jimmy McGill's. Speaking of people close to Jimmy, Howard and Chuck meeting with the insurance people, things aren't going their way. We knew that Jimmy's little ploy was going to have some consequences. We knew that he was setting Chuck up to have his rates raised, and here it is. The rates are going up, and from what it sounds like, it's not just on Chuck. These people don't want to be in the HHM business anymore. They want to just divest themselves, get out of, they're hiking these rates up to ridiculous amounts of prices because they are worried that the senior partner in this law firm is going to crack, and they don't want to be holding the bag for that. Howard, of course, tries to smooth things over. Before he can get in a word edgewise, Chuck jumps in and says, hey, we'll see y'all in court. You want to raise our rates? You're going to pay us, okay? And they leave the room, and Howard says to Chuck, finally, hey, maybe it's time you weren't here anymore. And this has been something that has been building for me, and partly because I was hearing about it, right? I heard some people theorize maybe Howard's gonna throw Chuck overboard somehow. It was theorized by me and some other people that it might be during the trial that he would stop supporting Chuck so much, but he stood by him, and I think that Howard thinks of Chuck as a friend, or at least has in the past. He wants the best for Chuck and himself, but he's not out to get Chuck. But Chuck is acting crazy. And not just in a, I have to stay in my house and not have lights on kind of crazy, like vindictive, acting out, going for the jugular all the time when that's not what you need to do, kind of crazy. And, Chuck tries to convince Howard that everything's okay. There's a great moment of acting from Michael McKean where he goes and says, I'm fine! And he goes and grabs the light. And you see in his eyes for just a second how much it does hurt him, but he masks it really well. I love seeing an actor pretending not to feel something. That's good stuff. And Howard kicks Chuck out. He says, no, you're gone. Get out. I'm forcing you out. It was a suggestion at first because I'm your friend, but now I'm nervous. Like, I don't want to work with you. You're screwing us over. You're a bad partner. Let's not do this anymore. And I've been waiting to see this from Howard for so long. He's been like a background, not a background character. That's not exactly right, but he's been sort of just going with the flow, kind of being Chuck's lackey, doing what Chuck wants him to do, putting up with pole vaulting over people's fences that gets to Chuck's backyard, turning off the lights all the time. So Chuck, and I don't think, like, he's, to a certain point, he's happy to do it for Chuck, but that point has passed. It has gotten more than he can bear, with Chuck going off the rails and acting so crazy in his mental problems. And good for Howard. Howard is the hero of this episode as far as I'm concerned. Next up, again, everything going on around Jimmy, but not directly related to Jimmy. Kim and Gatwood, the oil baron guy, are trying to work out the oil rights. They explain it in they work out what the problem is. I don't think it's important to hash out exactly what's going on here. The upshot of this scene is that Kim is dying tired. And that dying thing might end up being literal. I don't know. I thought she was going to die by the end of the episode, but especially by the time that she left the office and left Jimmy. We'll get into that when we get there. But she gets in the car, he runs off, and she's got a can of No-Dos in her cup holder, right? Or her car gets stuck in the sand out in the desert. She pushes it. Like, she does a great job. She doesn't need anybody. She's fixed it herself. She doesn't have to call for help or get a tow truck or, call the guy back. She figures it out for herself, but she almost loses control. She's this close to losing control. She manages to jump back in the car, stop it before it hits the oil rig, but things symbolically here are starting to go off the rails for Kim. She's got it under control, but just barely. And that's been something that's been building up throughout the season, especially with her taking on this big firm, doing all these late night work, and now she's got an extra client. It's too much. I mean, we knew it's too much. Then we get the continuation of that scene with Jimmy and the Bills and Irene, because Jimmy goes to Howard and says, hey, listen, why don't you guys take the payout? It's a good payout, a lot of money. Take a lot of money. Why don't you give these people their money? They need it. They need it real bad. And Howard, again, the hero of this episode, brings the hammer down on Jimmy and says, no, this is not about them. You're gonna come to me and guilt trip me about how I'm trying to get more money for the law firm when you are clearly here for your 20% stake in this payout, the $1.5 million that Jimmy calculated that he was going to get from this payout. And really throws the book at Jimmy, and he's right, okay? There are going to be Jimmy apologists. There always are. I know that you're watching this. If you're watching this, it's because you're a fan of the show. And if you're a fan of the show, you must like Jimmy McGill to some degree. But there are things that Jimmy does in this episode that are not good things, okay? Jimmy is wrong. He has his good arguments. I was on the Reddit thread for this episode, the post-episode discussion on Better Call Saul recap. I was on the Reddit thread for this episode, the post-episode discussion in the Better Call Saul subreddit, and the people defending Jimmy are getting on my nerves, right? Because there's a good chunk of the viewership now that is like, okay, Jimmy? Really? No. This is too far. And we'll get into specifics here, but I just want to nip it in the bud before we even get into it. I'm not on Jimmy's side, all right? I ask for comments and feedback here, but if you think that Jimmy is excused somehow in what he's about to do here, you're wrong, okay? He's doing the wrong thing. If Chuck had done this, we would be asking for him to die. Many of you already were, just because Chuck doesn't like Jimmy. And I get Chuck has his problems. He has a lot of problems. But Jimmy is wrong, and Howard is more right than Jimmy is here. Howard, yes, is interested in the good of his law firm. He wants to have money for the law firm. But Jimmy is trying to sabotage this case, right? And later on, Kim will even say, they don't close class action lawsuits this fast. What are you talking about? Jimmy's wrong. Howard's right. Howard gives him both barrels and, like, is had it enough with these McGill people. Howard's done with people whose last name is McGill. Get out of my sight. You guys are ruining my life. And I'm on board with that. Again, Howard, 100% the hero of this episode. Moving on to Hector and Gus. Hector and Gus and Nacho too. Yeah! Hector and Gus on the phone with the big boss man. The big boss man says, hey, listen, this joint hauling thing that you guys are doing, you can keep your territories, but we're going to stay with that. That's how I want to do it. And Hector is upset. Gus is... I love the way Giancarlo Esposito plays this. We know he has the plan, right? But he's got his very dour, like, I don't want this either, Don Hector. This is bad for me, too. And Hector he doesn't care anyway. But he freaking out, has one of his episodes, takes one of the pills. You're like, is this it? Is this the moment? Is Hector? No. Hector's fine. Power of placebo takes over once again. Nacho standing back there waiting for this to happen because Hector is now the nuts are tighter, right? They're tightening down on Nacho. Hector's going to be looking for this extra way to transport his stuff now more than ever. And the plan didn't work, at least not yet. Hector's still up. He's still kicking. And Nacho is very screwed. He's going to get a little bit more screwed in a bit. But before we get there, we see Jimmy put into plan. I mentioned a couple episodes ago that I wasn't on board with Jimmy anymore. All right? When Jimmy went down his revenge road and was just seeking to screw Chuck's life over for no reason other than to screw Chuck's life over, I was like, I can sympathize with aspects of this character's life, but I do not like Jimmy McGill overall anymore. I think that he has become a bitter, bad person. The kind of person that I would not want to hang out and be friends with. And here he puts into something into play something even more despicable. All right. He has this whole scheme where he starts undermining Irene, the sweet little old grandmother who he helped initially, right? And we were all on board with him because, hey, Jimmy's helping out these old people. What a great guy. He's doing good things, and then he's an elder law. And again, you could be on board with him because he was doing stuff for other people. And even if it happened to benefit him, man, it sure was good for them too. And we can have both, right? We can have Jimmy benefit himself and help other people. And here is where Jimmy just completely sets out to screw this woman over. Plays the worm tongue role with her and her friends and goes and starts talking up how much they could get, starts acting like she has all this money. He has this ploy where he gives her these shoes, tells her not to tell anybody where she got them from, and then says, oh, hey, look, she's got these new shoes. Like, what a douchebag. Wow. I cannot, and he keeps going with it. He strips her of everything that made her happy, all of her friends, all of her community, and, the final moment of this scheme is him there in bingo, pulling her up and asking people to clap and nobody clapping because she's lost all of her friends because of this guy. And then he moves in for the kill. I do not care, again, about your arguments about how, like, well, these people are old and they're going to die and Jimmy's just trying to get in the right. He is acting in his own self-interest completely and screwing other people over to do it. This lady doesn't need the money nearly as much as she needs her friends, okay? The money is not as important as the people who matter to her. And this sucks. Jimmy sucks. Okay? I'm done with the McGills too. I'm not done with the show. I still enjoy the show and everything, but like, I'm done with being on board with anything these two brothers do. It'll be fun to watch Jimmy scheme and stuff to a certain degree, and hopefully there will be people that we can get on board with him screwing over, but we've seen this building. Like, this isn't out of nowhere for Jimmy. We knew he was capable of this kind of thing. This is just to another level, and the fact that there are people defending him at all is reprehensible. Like, it's just, this is not how any human being should act. Jimmy screws this lady over, and I hope that he's going to turn into Saul Goodman. He's going to lose Kim one way or the other. All right. Chuck is, his relationship with him is broken. He's going to end up with a really bitter secretary, and he's going to be shipped off to Omaha, and he deserves it. Okay. At this point, Jimmy deserves everything that's coming to him in Breaking Bad. The other thing that happens sort of in wrapping up what's going on with Nacho, he tries one last thing to get around having to do something else, right? He's in a box. The box is closing in. It's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And the only way he has right now is to tell his dad, listen, fine, yes, Hector Salamanca, I'm working for him. He's a bad guy. You're going to want to do what he says when he comes and demands to run the shop, okay? Just roll over. I promise you I'm taking care of it, but it's going to be a few weeks. By the way, Nacho does not know this. He doesn't know how long it's going to take for this thing to actually hurt or kill Hector. I mean, we know it doesn't kill him, but Nacho is telling his dad a few weeks, but he doesn't have that for sure. And the way his dad plays this out is the actor who plays his dad is so moving. I mean, especially as a father myself, and I'm not a father of somebody as old as Nacho, and hopefully I'm not a father of somebody who's going to screw up like Nacho. But if I was, even when my 4-year-old and 2-year-old screw up, and like, I have to say to them, why did you do that? Why would you knew better than to do that thing? And I had one of those experiences this morning, actually, where I was having a really good morning with my son, and then he did something that he knew he wasn't supposed to do, and it really kind of broke us apart a little bit, where the fun we were having was gone because, he had broken the rules. And here is Nacho's dad seeing his son go down a path he didn't want him to go down. He obviously knows something about these people. He knows who Hector Salamanca is. And he might know that Nacho had been involved with them, but he thinks he's out now. And Nacho has to come clean and tell him everything. And Nacho's trying to protect his dad, but he knows his dad is not going to stand for this kind of thing. And, his dad doesn't go for it. His dad says, no, he doesn't say 100% no, I'm not going to do this, but he says, get out of my house to Nacho, and not in like a, get out of my house, but like just, I can't believe that you've done this. I can't believe that you've let me down this far. And Nacho, I mean, that pouring out that milk in the sink just so like slowly and sadly and respectfully was, Nacho is turning into an amazing character this season, as we've talked about already. Before we get to the final piece, Chuck decides to sue HHM. He says he's here now, right? We started out the series with Jimmy going into HHM saying, y'all owe Chuck. Y'all owe Chuck big time. Give him the money. He has his share. It's $8 million. Give him the share and we'll be out of your hair. And of course, HHM doesn't have that kind of money. And so now it's Chuck. It's Chuck's turn to be tooting that horn. And he says, hey, I want my money. Where's my share? You guys going to kick me out? I'm out for real. All right. Take the McGill off the sign and give me my $8 million. Thank you and please. And Chuck is sinking all of his relationships. And there's another moment here where he tries to make it look like he's doing normal. He has this great electric blender that he holds right in his hand. And while Howard's there, he's fine. And later on, he's just like, breaking down. He's pushing himself to the limit. he's going to crack pretty soon, and he's definitely going to bring as much of HHM down with him as he can. Speaking of people who are going to crack, the episode closes with Kim headed out to the Gatwood case. She has her plan. She's got all her files in her big folders, and she's sets out, and Jimmy comes in with the news that he has closed out his deal. He's rich, essentially. Yeah, I guess so. And I think that it's really significant that Jimmy had to go full scumbag to get a win. Like, there was no way, and they never let him do both, right? They never let him do the right thing in the show and get a win. He had to go all the way into being the scumbag that we know he can be. But he did get his win. It's a bitter win, but he does have the $1.5 million now, if that my calculations are correct, or at least he will shortly. I suspect that that'll get snatched away from him somehow. I mean, if I was a $1.5 million heir, I would not go and practice law in a strip mall, but that's just me. Kim doesn't have time to hear it, though. She's out the door. She's late already. She's, again, pushed to the limit. She says, think about whatever you're going to say and say it to me later. And at that moment, I was like, she dead. She 100% dead. There's no way you say, think about what you were going to say and say it to me later to Jimmy McGill in this moment where he's super rich, walk out the door, and then come back to him and be like, oh, yep, we're fine. But she's not dead yet. It's super tense moments. Like, I think everybody knows this is where we're going to. We're going to some kind of crash, and I was expecting, like, a T-bone type accident where she's, you know, like, somebody just comes out of nowhere. She runs a red light and gets hit. I think we saw Walt have that happen to him in season 4 of Breaking Bad. But here it's just her. We have a callback to that wonderful dozing off shot from the episode. I forget exactly which number it was, but where she falls asleep and then just boom, like wakes up 5 minutes later because she set her alarm clock. It's one of those. She's just sort of driving along. Her eyes are still open, and then pow, right into the rocks off the side of the road. Airbags all over the place, papers all over the place. I don't know what's going to happen to Kim. I mean, I think that probably calling up Gatwood and these other guys and saying, I was in a car wreck, I will be late, that's probably not going to sink her law practice. That I don't think is what is the implication here. But I don't know where this goes with her being still alive. Because I thought this was just it for her. Maybe this is a wake-up call for her and she leaves Jimmy, and that's like she doesn't die, she's just out. But I don't know. I do know we have one more episode this season. One final piece of the puzzle to put together. Jimmy is winning, and everybody else is falling apart. And it's amazing to me that this is where we're ending. I think that I don't know what's going to happen next episode. I don't know how bad it's going to get or what's going to happen to Jimmy. I think he needs to be hit hard back. I kind of want him to keep the money for a bit, though. I like the idea of rich Jimmy being able to live out this year, just sort of doing, $1.5 million isn't just buy your own island type money, but it could get him through. He doesn't need to be living on ramen for this year. The arc of everyone doing badly except for Jimmy, who's doing great, at least from his goals perspective thing, is amazing to me. It sets up so many things to explode, and I cannot wait to see where that goes. I'm sorry about my voice, by the way. I didn't realize how cracky it was until I started recording, but we made it through. I'm sure you were hopefully able to hear me, and I will be back next week with the finale of this season's Better Call Saul recap. Leave a comment, as always. Like this video if you liked it. Do the other thing otherwise, and take care.